Hello, everyone. This is Andrew Blumstrom along with Amanda Fulbright, and you are listening to ABA Unfiltered, where each episode we interview guests from around the world of ABA. Whether you're a BCBA, RBT, or just interested in ABA, you are sure to pick up some actionable advice you can utilize on your journey. Now, without further ado, we would like to welcome our guests, Dr. Stuart Pasecco and Alan Fulbright. Why don't you both start by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and what interests you about the topic of family guidance? We'll go ahead and start with you, Stuart.
Thanks. Well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for having us on the podcast today. We're excited to be able to join you guys and talk a little bit about this. As I said, my name is Stuart Pasecco. A little bit about my background. I'm a child psychologist by training. I started my career at the University of Houston, where I was a faculty member I stayed there about 12 years. And my research area has always been kids with different types of challenging behaviors, learning difficulties, things like that. And I've always my interest from an academic perspective, was based on the idea that we have a pretty good idea of what works. The challenge a lot of times is how do we get what we know works implemented in a consistent way? Because that's always kind of where the challenge is when it comes to trying to get the outcomes that evidence-based practices promise. And so when I was at the university, I did a lot of research around what facilitated implementation, what challenged implementation, with a specific focus in the schools. And so I ended up starting an ed tech company that had a technology solution that made it easy for people in the schools to implement evidence-based practices, would collect data about outcomes, things like that. The name of that software was called Review 360. And we had a lot of fun working in schools and in special education. And that company ended up getting acquired by Pearson. And I was in their clinical assessment division for about 5 or 6 years after that. And but while there, I always wanted to take what we had done in the schools and create a solution for families, because as one of the things that we know is that the challenges in trying to get things implemented at home are kind of similar to what happens in the schools. So that's really kind of where my interest in family guidance came from. I have 2 kids of my own, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this or not, but people would say, okay, well, now that you have kids, all that behavior stuff you guys recommend all the time, do you still think it works? And I'd say, yeah, it still works. But what I have a better appreciation for today as a parent is why parents struggle doing the things that we recommend to them. Yeah. And so, right, because they've got competing demands, everyone's, they don't have any time, they're overwhelmed, they're stressed out, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of a little bit of a long-winded answer, but it's really kind of a combination of, my research interest, my experience with creating technology solutions before, and then also, knowing that I believe we can help take what we know works and translate it in a way that's manageable for parents to see the benefits from the things that we know can produce better outcomes.
Awesome. And Alan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a BCBA, been in the business for quite a while here with a pretty varied range of experiences, and just as far as like my passion for family guidance and why that's important to me is that's just what I've seen be quite often like the missing point to a kid's success. Like we see a lot of success in clinics and we see a lot of stuff happen in our sessions, but it seems like really creating those long lasting outcomes, like Stuart was saying, is we're missing that component that helps it move into the natural environment, kind of establish and stay there. I feel like that's really been my passion throughout my career, though, as I've worked with different populations, different people, I've ran into just where that was where I excelled and where I felt the most comfortable was working with, whether it's staff people or parents or whoever that may be, but that's where I was most effective, as getting that training done and making them a little bit more comfortable with and educated about what they're having to deal with. So that's where I really fit into the family guidance part.
And family guidance is extremely important to, ensure that the populations we serve are able to, as you guys mentioned, implement what we're working on in our clinics or in the schools at the home, which is extraordinarily important. Now, Stuart, you've been on the podcast before, but for our listeners that may not be familiar with Attend Behavior, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about what you do and what services you offer.
Absolutely. Well, Attend Behavior is a child behavioral health platform that's designed to enable the delivery of family guidance. And so Attend really includes two parts to it. One is that there's a mobile application for parents. And then the second is there's a clinician portal that the clinicians will use to gain a little bit better insight into the parents' learning experience, engagement process, outcomes they're getting, things like that. So now Attend itself, there really are three components to it. One is and I will tell you just a quick story. As I was thinking about developing Attend, I collected data from about 1,000 parents. And I asked them questions like, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, what types of practices and strategies have they used. And, interestingly enough, and I asked them one question, which was, if you could recommend any strategy of all the strategies you've tried, if you could recommend one strategy to another parent who had a child like yours, what would it be? And parent training popped right to the top of the list, and which is encouraging. Unfortunately, right, only about 20% of the sample actually had access to it. And so, when we started thinking about Attend, that's where I was like, okay, I want to really kind of focus in on parent training. And so Attend, the next part was we wanted to make sure we had really good content, right? So that we could share with parents what it is we know works. So in doing that, we were fortunate enough to connect with Dr. Karen Bears, who's at Seattle Children's Hospital, and she's the lead author of the Ruby Parent Training Program for Disruptive Behavior for families who have children with autism. So after many discussions with Dr. Bears, we were fortunate to really agree to work with her on translating that program into a technology solution. So the Ruby is published by Oxford University Press. We licensed the program from them. And so, obviously the first part of Attend is the content, right? So, and it's aligned to Ruby. So it includes 10 to 12 courses that really kind of focus on helping build principle understanding of why kids act the way they do, behavior, things like that. Those core practices that we know lead to better behavior, and then how to teach skills and strategies. So the content is one part of it. Now, one of the things that I'll say a lot about behavior is that it's kind of tricky. And what I mean by that is, on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward, right? So if you explain the concept of reinforcement to a parent, positive reinforcement in particular, right? It seems pretty straightforward. People are familiar with it. But where people struggle is when they try to implement those things for the first time. And that's where the under the water, the iceberg kind of analogy, that's where the complexity of behavior lives. So yeah, okay, it makes sense. I want to identify a problem behavior or a positive behavior I want to promote, find a good reinforcer for the child, create some sort of schedule, and presto magic, the kid's behavior is turned around in a day, right? It doesn't work that way. And so the second part of Attend is really designed to, after a parent reads about a particular concept in a course, is to help them understand how to personalize the strategies that we talk about to match the needs of the child, right? So it helps ask them some questions, basically is kind of creating a little plan for them. And then we talk to the parents about, as we talk about strategies and techniques, when would be a good time to practice these things. And so the technology then kind of serves as a bit of a coach, right? So we teach a strategy like catch them doing good. So we ask the parent, when would be a good time to practice this? They tell us. Around that time, we push out notifications through the phone that says, hey, now's the time to practice catch them doing good. Here's what to be on the lookout for. Here's what to say when you see this happen. So the second part are all tools designed specifically to reduce the response effort of the parent and make it easy for them to really kind of have some success with these approaches. And then the third component, obviously, is the ability to collect data, right? So the parents can go in and quickly and easily report incidents that are happening. We do a little check-in with them to see how the day is going. So that's the mobile solution for the parents. The clinicians, as I said a minute ago, can log in and see, one, are they completing the courses in the way we'd like for them to do? How are they doing on the quizzes? Are they demonstrating an understanding of the concepts? And three, are they engaged, right? Are they using these tools? Are they building the plan out? And then four, how is the kid doing, right? What sort of outcomes are we getting? There's other communication tools and things like that, but that's in essence, what we do with Attend.
Awesome. Yeah, I can imagine, especially as you mentioned, life finds a way to cause chaos. So I can imagine having that mobile application with all those push notifications could be very useful for families to kind of have those reminders that, hey, this is a great time to start implementing these things that we've talked about, in your home.
Well, it's funny, like, everyone always talks about the content, and content is critical, but it's supporting the parent in the use of these techniques, especially during the early learning process. That's critical. And then, of course, you can use all these tools after you've gone through the content to support the implementation. But as you might guess, right? So I have my demo version set up on my phone. And one day, my kids were bickering in the kitchen about something. And, can't remember, I was doing something, probably dealing with a dog or something like that. And I got distracted and I turned back around and my kitchen doing good notification popped up on my phone. And I looked over and the kids were cooperating. I was like, hey, I really like how you guys are working together on that. So
they're like, shut up, Dad.
Yeah.
Exactly. But they're teenagers and they roll it.
That's not the reinforcement they want, right? Give us some money.
Yeah.
But the push notifications, the coaching tips, things like that, those are the things aside from the content the parents tell us they really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Very cool. So shifting gears a little bit to talking about the dynamic or the relationship between a clinician and a family. Building that relationship can be really tough for both parties at times. First of all, do you agree? And why do you think that is?
I would say that that's like the biggest challenge that is happening out there, especially in the ABA world, because we tend to approach things a very cold and scientific way. And I think that's the biggest advantage that something like Attend gives a clinician that maybe is a little scared to work with a parent, is a little apprehensive about walking in there and trying to teach this parent. And, there is probably 20 years their senior. And, I'm supposed to go talk to them. What do I talk to them about? Well, I can talk to them about Attend behavior. And it also gives that kind of platform and some structure to work into those sessions. And also really the prerequisite skills that matter the most there. So just having some common ground, just if nothing else, Attend behavior has some common ground for them to find and start talking about and building some rapport over, even if they have some sort of glitch they have to deal with, right? Like at least they've got some dialogue going between them, to just kick things off so that they can talk, and find just something to spend some time working together on, right? So I think that if there was one thing I could get out there is, hey, that relationship is the most important part of your clinician-parent relationship, is actually being able to communicate together and maybe make a little joke that's professionally responsible. But I think that's the key component that may be missing more than anything else, is that we're humans first.
Yeah.
And I think kind of building on that, when we collected some data asking clinicians, what are some of the barriers they experience? They report, they feel like parents don't follow through really well, right? So they talk about that a lot. They will talk about how parents are difficult to engage a lot of times, and sometimes that parents don't seem interested. Those are things that I think speak to some of the things that we hear clinicians say, and why what Alan just said is so critical. Because a lot of times it's, hey, we're going to jump right into this. And you need to really kind of establish that relationship with the parent, make sure that we're working on things that are parent directed, I think is the other piece of that. And so it feels relevant to them. Then, I will say that one of the things that has been remarkably similar to me from my experience with Review 360 was we saw pretty early that only 15% of the college educations around the country provide any sort of training for teachers in behavior, right? So what that means is that most teachers, the only training they get when it comes to classroom management and behavior is on the job training. Now, what we've seen, what we know from the research literature in the ABA world is that, unfortunately, a lot of clinicians aren't receiving training on how to work with parents in their training programs. And when I put on my old training director's hat, from the university, I understand it because you got what depends on if you have a master's degree or not, but it's 20 some odd hours that you have to take someone through and you very compressed schedule. A lot of times it's completely online. So it's hard to work that into a pretty crowded curriculum. But I think, yes, parents seem disinterested, not engaged. Clinicians sometimes are hesitant for the reasons that Alan talked about a moment ago. But I think the other thing is the training programs don't do a good job necessarily of preparing clinicians to work with adults. They do a good job working with kids, right? So as a function of that, clinicians don't always have a clinical framework for how to engage parents or what we're going to do. And so they may sometimes approach it as if, I'm going to work with the parent as if I would my RBT, and this is what I'm going to train them to do. And that doesn't feel relevant always to a parent. So those are some of the things that we hear people talk about and some of the challenges that we see.
Yeah.
I hear, BCBA's clinicians say they're disinterested, they're disengaged, and I'm like, I promise you they're interested in their child. It's your job to help them understand why this is relevant, and it's your job to be interesting. It's your job to engage them. If they're not engaged, it's your job to engage them, because I promise you they're interested in their child.
Yeah, that's very true, Amanda.
The tendency for them to quickly just be like, they're not engaged and throw their hands up is concerning. Spend some time, think about their perspective. I'm going to get real, act on this, but think about their perspective. What are they doing in life? What matters to them, right? Like, what's most important to that parent and their relationship with their child? And let's just ask them, like, what do you want to work on, instead of pushing what's in our treatment plan back out there to, now y'all want you to teach them to match. Like, no, that doesn't make any sense in my real life. Like, let's try to find a way that, this matters for me and my kid, and how to change our lives and reduce that stress level.
Yeah, I think, the other thing you said before, Alan, that I think is true and worth noting is, whenever you're doing something that's a little unfamiliar, it's not reinforcing, right? So it's hard, it's difficult. So if we think about the clinicians who maybe, because of the age differences, maybe they don't have kids, things like that, they haven't had a whole lot of training opportunities, working with parents, may feel uncomfortable to them and not very reinforcing and a little intimidating. And so, that's where, I know like what you guys are doing in Blue Spring, has always been, there's been a focus on family guidance and connecting with parents, and also, helping provide, some frameworks, particularly for people that are early in their career, on how to engage people and how to work with them. So I think those are important points around all this.
I do think that you should honor the space that both parties are in, that they could be in this learning zone that is by nature uncomfortable. And to be uncomfortable in your job, in front of your stakeholder, your biggest stakeholders, is a hard place to be. And I think we should honor that and help coach through those phases when possible.
Oh, when you're working with clinicians and you can say, I get it. Like, it's not easy and it's okay that you feel that way, but the parent is also there too. So,
Yes.
so let them be vulnerable. You be vulnerable and say, man, I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm going to try to help you. If you can just work with me and we'll do our best to help your kid. Like, how would that would feel great to me as a parent?
Yeah.
For them to settle into that space.
And the same is true for clinical supervisors, right? Is to say to the people they're working with, what's it like for you to work with parents, right? What's that experience like for you? And to let them kind of be able to, Amanda, to your point, kind of articulate, make it safe for them to articulate that, right? Mm-hmm. Because we know everyone feels that way. Everyone remembers the first time you worked with a parent, right? It may have been in graduate school, maybe soon afterwards. You probably didn't have kids. And there is a little bit of that imposter syndrome that floats mm-hmm. around, like, oh, I desperately want to help this parent. At the same time, I don't know if I can. And so there's a lot of anxiety around it. So I think creating a safe space for the parent in the way that Alan's describing is really important. But I think we can model that from a clinical supervisor perspective with the people that we're supervising, right? To let them know, hey, we've been there too, and it may feel a little uncomfortable, but here's the things that we could do to kind of work past it.
Yeah, right. We kind of forget our ABA, right, when we're working with the folks we're supervising, and forget to realize, okay, this person has a set of behaviors. They may be engaging in some emotional avoidant behavior of working with this parent. What is that? See if you can get them talking about it, bring that up. And that puts you as that supervisor in that vulnerable spot again, right? Like, we've got to figure this out together.
Yeah, fundamentally, they're escaping from something, right? What is it?
Right.
Let's talk about that.
Experiential avoidance.
So follow up, let's say that we have a listener who is a BCBA right now and is currently engaged in some relationships with parents that might not be the most productive or the best models of relationships. And because we all know it's a lot easier to start fresh with the next one than to go back and repair the current one. But we owe it to the family, our clients, and ourselves to repair that relationship. What's your advice?
Well, I mean, if you've been having it depends on where it is, right? Like, that's a very idiosyncratic answer for what you've done to this parent and how you're going to fix it. But figure out what it is, right? Like, do some assessment of where you are right now. How is our relationship? Does this parent want to make contact with me whenever, we have to? If I'm going to drop the kid off, do they want to talk for a minute? And can I just get on a phone call and start building some common ground, right? Like, it may not be an official, hey, parent, I just want to start our relationship over. Yeah. But it can be a phone call where you say, hey, let's talk for a minute and just start to build rapport again, start to pair a little bit. And I don't want to say as far as going to make some behavioral contracting, but you can say, hey, we really need to do this. This is for your kid. But let's see how we can work together. And put the ball in their court. Let them make some of the decisions. How do you think we should work into this? What works for you? How could we approach this in a way that's going to really be meaningful? And I think asking the question around how could we reduce your stress when it involves your child, that's a game changer, because then you help that parent diffuse from the issues they're having, and they start to think, oh, this is what I'm here for. That's what this is about, right? If I can make it about reducing my stress and anxiety, it maybe switches the way they're thinking about family guidance in general.
Yeah, I think that's really important, asking that question. If we could work on something together to help reduce your stress or to help promote some independence with your child so that you have one less demand, what would it be, right? And then I think, I think that's really an important point, Alan. I think the other thing, this is where I put my psychologist hat on a little bit, right? And where you
like that hat.
Where you process the relationship a little bit. And but I think you could ask, what you could do is frame it as, hey, one of the things I like to do is that with the families that I'm working with is do check-ins, right? And I haven't had an opportunity to do that as much with you as I'd like. So why don't we use some time to just do kind of a check-in? And what has worked with so far, what has not worked, and how could we help, meet your needs a little bit better than perhaps we have been. So and that kind of pairs with that question that Alan asked, right? So I think that's an important, a point around trying to connect it, and it does take some vulnerability because you'll hear things you don't want to necessarily hear from a parent, and I remember when I was in my supervision class in graduate school, we had to video ourselves doing therapy with our kids. And so I, had my video all set up, and I had this kid that I was working with. He was real challenging. And so it was the first session, and I was pretty proud of the first session. So I showed it to my professor, and I went to go turn off the tape, and I didn't turn it off quick enough. I didn't even know what was on it after I left the room. But apparently after I left the room, the dad said, "So what do you think about this guy?" And I was
Some really clean feedback there.
right. Right. So my professor's like, "Oh, this is a good part."
Yeah.
And the kid said, "Well, he's not a buddy." And I thought, "Oh, that's good." So, like sometimes, creating opportunities to have those discussions with you about what you're working on, what, I think are important.
Yeah, Stuart mentioned putting on your psychology hat. Like he often, when we meet with a lot of people, right, and have to talk with this relationship of psychologist and BCBA, which is different, right? And I'm a very emotional behavioral sort of BCBA, and Stuart is a very behavioral sort of psychologist. So we work together very well in that way. But what is it, Stuart? We're both reading from the same
Yeah.
hymnal.
I say we go to different churches, but read the same hymn.
Yeah, I was just singing the same song, just a little different words.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
All right. I want to shift gears into a little bit of shifting gears, but talking about a little bit of what we were talking about earlier with training opportunities. A lot of schools, like you said, are not specifically training on family guidance and how to engage with families and in those relationships. A lot of programs are online, so there's not those practice opportunities. So you can read about it. You can maybe watch a video about it. You might listen to a podcast like this about it, but you haven't gotten to practice it, right? So, do you guys think you need a mentor in this area? And how does, if a current listener right now is a current practitioner, behavior analyst out there, and maybe they're solo, maybe they're with a smaller company that doesn't have someone that can be their mentor, how does someone seek mentorship in this area right now?
That's the $1 million question, right? Like, because it's not just family guidance that
Yeah.
a lot of folks need that mentorship and that kind of coaching in. It may be the biggest area, but it's certainly not the only one. So I strive to put together training components that touch on things that I might provide mentorship that might kind of reach somebody at the point where they are, right? Like within putting together a building relationships training, for instance, or how to structure your family guidance sessions. I try to build in all of those relationships that I've had with different clinicians that came to me with issues, and I felt like I stepped into that mentorship role, which is very, very often, and maybe where some of the majority of my passion is working with those clinicians and helping them get there. Like I try to take those pieces and add them in a way that maybe hit the majority of those folks and those questions that I've had, and help them find a way. If they're listening, maybe they can connect it into what happens in their real life. I don't know where you go though. I mean,
Well, the I would say for it is tough to find a supervisor who can work with you if you don't necessarily have someone that close by. But I mean, I think there are informal ways of doing that, and have a mentor. There's certainly a lot of communities on Facebook and other places, and I think it's probably wouldn't be that hard to start a little group for someone who'd be interested in maybe mentoring some people and create a little support network within social media to do that. There are online opportunities. For example, Dr. Bears she has I think it's a 4-part training series on Ruby specifically, but it's something that people can access online, and I can share the link to you if you guys wanted to share that out later on. But that's an opportunity. One of the nice things about something like that is that Dr. Bears, she'll say a lot, you know, the content is one thing, right? Making sure we're explaining the content in ways that make sense to parents and connects with them. But what you really get out of those trainings a lot of times is she talks a lot about, what to do when parents say things don't work, because that's where the magic is, right? Because it doesn't work out of the box for every single situation. So I think, part of it is getting equipped. That's why a mentor is important, right? Is that you get equipped with some of that, what do I do when this happens types of situations. And the training, that Dr. Barr says, it's a 4-part video series. And it's a great training. Some people are interested in investing some time in something, and I think it's really, really useful.
It really, like, at the very least, gives you some troubleshooting when you're having trouble, pointers around this parent says this, and helping guide a clinician through saying, well, if that's not working for you, what might work better? And here's a way we can, if that's it, then let's fit all this content and kind of helps you tailor what they're going to do in real life, right? Like, it's definitely no substitute for having a one-on-one person that's really talking through your day to day, but it's pretty awesome. So.
Yeah, the name of that program I mentioned is ABAC, Excellence in Continuing Education. So you can go online and they have some on-demand training there.
Great. We'll get a link from you and put it in the show notes here. I have found in the past, like, if I'm going to have a conversation that I might not be sure how that's going to go, or I just am a little anxious about it, that it's good to role play with someone, even if it's not a mentor per se, but even if it's your spouse or your friend or a roommate, to just say, hey, can you role play this with me? And just the more you practice having those types of conversations, the better it's going to feel in real life. What do you guys think about that suggestion around family guidance specifically?
Yeah, I think especially if you could instruct the parent, the person, on what kind of person the parent is, and maybe you could draw some sort of response from that that they may make or not, and run through a couple. And even if you put those scenarios in your head and were able to think about that, because at the end of it, it's thinking about the way that person would respond and taking their perspective, right? If you don't have a mentor, you can at the very least learn to take the person's perspective that you're having issues with. Like, how do they think about that, right? And so maybe you're just able to switch that around, because I think often when you're in that mentorship world and you're helping a clinician figure that out and you're mentoring them, what you're really doing is talking them through finding their own answer to questions. And maybe if you're able to teach them to figure that out, and they're able to do that a little bit themselves, that generalizes to different places. Like, well, what would I want someone to do in this situation to get me to engage in family guidance? What if I had this kid worked this job? had these relationship issues that I know that this person is having, and I had this kind of stress. What would I want my clinician to do for me? So maybe giving them, equipping them with that piece might be, I'm not going to say a substitute for mentorship because,
Right.
But
it could help.
And I would be remiss without saying that, Alan's put together a lot of trainings for us on this. So, one of the things that I saw with the first technology company I had was a lot of times we think, okay, we'll develop these solutions, we'll work with people to develop it, figure out, we'll put it out there and let them use it. Right. And that doesn't work. Right. So you can't just throw technology at people and let them go at it. Some people will do it, but most people struggle, need some help around it. So we've actually developed a lot of support training material around, how to structure a family guidance session, how to build relationships, how to go about planning for it. So it is like with Attend, we know that some of that work's going to be needed. So I would be remiss without saying Alan's put together some great trainings around that, and of course there's all that training available around ACT, which is kind of the basis for building.
We'll have on there soon too.
Well, I know like Bluesburg works with Attend Behavior for our listeners' transparency. But you guys have been such a great help as perhaps informal or ad hoc mentors for our team in this area of family guidance, using Attend and not using Attend, just in general relationship building, goal selection, things like that. You have helped us develop some e-learning training, but also the customer service that y'all are able to offer to our team and jumping on meetings and troubleshooting has been worth its weight in gold, so we really 100%. Appreciate that.
That's kind of you to say.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a little love fest right now.
And
we feel the same way about you guys. So go ahead.
The training, there's a couple of trainings that I know that you guys have available for subscribers or companies you're working with, but they're also available on our website, our CEU website as well. So there's 2 of them on there, building relationships, and then ACT and family guidance that Alan has done. So we'll put a link to those as well, as a link to Attend as well.
Great. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing, right? We're all trying to improve outcomes for kids and help parents or families, be able to have the types of help their kids achieve their goals and dreams too. So we're all kind of in it for the same reason. And I think, the other side of that is we've been talking a lot about parents and engaging parents and all that, but, we're, to some degree, one of the things that we realize with Attend is you got to help build clinical habits out of this stuff, right? And a lot of times, some clinicians will have those, orientations, some may not. And so that's, what's really important to us is not just say, we love the technology, obviously we love what we do, but it's really the opportunity to work with the clinicians out there and try to make an impact that way as well. So that, we appreciate you saying that, Amanda, and I've loved working with the team, but I think we get as much out of trying to help the practices move the needle in the way they want it moved as we do anything.
Yeah, we learn a lot about, and it's not always just about the mentoring and relationships. Sometimes we find things that are just buried within systems or inabilities to get things into workflow because there's so much other things going on that we see. We're like, well, if it hurts when you do that, stop doing that, and that's a big piece that we get to see too, that really just makes people's practices a little bit better. I would say it changes everything, but I'm a little bit biased toward family guidance being the most important thing in the world, right? Because I eat, sleep, and breathe that. But it is like there's no outcomes for the kid if you can't get that to happen. You've got to get the real world environment changed, and the parent will become more engaged with other environments if they engage with yours, because they'll start to notice that they can get empowered to tell the kid's teacher when they go to school, hey, don't do that. That doesn't work. and that changes another environment, and this kind of domino effect of stuff out there. So
Yeah, yeah. I think the other thing that I think we started to recognize in the industry, when I told you I collected data from a lot of parents, right? So I collected data from a lot of parents. The other thing I did was I went and talked to healthcare executives. And I spent a lot of time meeting with executives from different health plans early on. And I asked them, where does parent training fit within your continuum of services? Right. And how do you prioritize, or if you prioritize it at all? And it was interesting that consistently I kept hearing from them a lot of the stuff that Alan just said, which is we realize that if we can't get parents engaged and involved, we're not going to get the outcomes we want clinically. And so, a lot of them were forecasting that they're going to put more expectations around parent engagement and parent involvement. And, we know healthcare moves a little slow, right? So that's going to take time, but you certainly see the payers are starting to ask these questions, and certain payers put incentives in place for better family guidance. And so I think we know clinically why we need to do this, and I think we're also going to be hearing that same message more and more from the health plans.
Yeah, we've seen that just in this last year, right? And I would expect to see more and more and more of that. And I think that's good. I think it's
Well,
going to be
they've got to
good.
reduce the time that kids are spending in treatment. They can't, it's not our job to run a really fancy daycare. The kid just comes to forever,
Yeah.
or up until they're whatever age we accept, whether you're doing early intervention and you're ending that at 8, or if you're going to see kids at home and in the home environment until they're 20, like that's eventually going to end, and they don't want to pay for it forever. That's expensive stuff. So the answer to being able to shorten that amount of treatment and make the kid more successful, just generally make outcomes better, is to get the other people in the environment equipped to reinforce the behaviors that we're training. So that just makes sense, right? It's just good ABA.
Right. I mean, particularly when you think about turnover of clinicians, natural attrition. Turnover is big right now in many industries. That parent's the consistent person in the equation.
Yeah, sure.
They don't turn over as often.
They don't turn over often. Yeah. Well, guys, before we start to edge on wrapping up, I do want to plug for our listeners that you can see myself and these two gentlemen, as well as Dr. Karen Bears, the lead author of Ruby, and Dr. Sharon Kerr in a panel at APBA coming up. So if you're going to be attending APBA live in person or live streaming that, be sure to check out that presentation and get to hear more about thoughts on family guidance. So I want to plug that. Andrew, are you ready to do our questions of the week?
I am ready for our questions of the week. Alan and Stuart, are you guys ready?
I've been waiting for this the whole time.
Awesome. We've got 3 questions for you. 2 of them are the same for each of our guests. And then the third one is a wild card question, which we've got a spinning wheel, and we will let the wheel kind of decide which question we will go down the road for you guys.
Perfect.
So starting us, fate will decide. First question for both of you, I guess, would just be, tell us something you've learned lately. And it doesn't need to be related to family guidance or ABA, just the last thing you guys have learned.
Man, that's surprisingly hard to answer.
So you're talking to 2 training professionals, so of course we're going to ask about what have you learned lately.
Okay, be sure to take your dog out at night if you suspect he has diarrhea.
That is a good lesson to learn. Not the best way to probably wake up in the morning either, Stuart, I would imagine.
I'm just going to go with that tropical plants need a lot more water than you would really think that they do.
When you think you've had enough, double that.
Yeah. Yeah. They really suck it up.
Awesome. And kind of along those same lines, let's say you find yourself with an extra hour in your day. How do you spend it?
Besides watching this podcast.
Besides watching this
right.
podcast.
So, do something you enjoy, kind of unplug and do something you enjoy.
Well, what is that, Stuart, for you?
For me, it's reading, actually.
I was going to say it would probably be reading. Yeah.
Yeah. I just
Unless it's really nice outside, then it may just be sitting outside, like
reading,
watching the day go by.
No, I think for Alan, it's preparing barbecue. I don't think.
Well, yeah.
and
That's usually an early morning
barbecue. It is quite the
We're now 2 podcast episodes for 2 talking about Alan's barbecue.
Yeah.
The thing.
I have his own podcast on that soon.
Coming spring 2023.
Yeah.
All right. So for the last question for you guys, give me 1 second to get the wheel up here. Alan or Stuart, who would like to do the honors of deciding what question you would like asked?
Go ahead, Alan.
How do I decide?
So what's going to happen? I don't know if you can see my screen now. There we go.
Oh, here we are. All right.
So on the screen, I'm going to go ahead and hit the play button here. When you are ready, just go ahead and let me know to stop. Once you hit stop, I will go ahead and stop the wheel. And each one of these numbers is associated with a question I have in front of me. And that is the question that you guys will finish the podcast with. So right. I will go ahead and hit start. And whenever you are ready, go ahead and tell me to stop.
Stop.
All right. Question 7. What was your first job?
My very first job would have definitely been like a carpenter's helper carrying tools around.
I was a busboy at the Kinsman restaurant in Grapevine, Texas.
Ooh.
Is it still open?
No, it's not.
I was going to suggest dinner.
Not my,
Yeah.
Not my fault.
Well, excellent. Thank you both for playing Question of the Week and coming on to the podcast to talk about family guidance. I think we all agree that it is one of the most important things in our services that we're offering right now. And I encourage everyone to learn something about family guidance. If you're feeling a little shaky on it, go to the trainings that are offered at your conferences or seek them out online. And if you ever need any more suggestions, reach out to these guys. I'm sure that they would be glad to talk to you. If you're interested in checking out Attend Behavior, please go to where, Stuart?
www.attendbehavior.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys for joining us.
It's fun
times. Bye-bye. Thanks for having us.
If you or someone you know is looking for some CEUs, head over to bcbaceu.bluesprigautism.com and use the promo code PODCAST to get $5 off any CEU in the catalog. A link to the site can be found below in the description. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.